could there be a new chairman of the BBC who might actually stand up to the prima donna that is Gary Lineker? Someone once called me a prima donna. I said I think I'm more post-Madonna. With me now is Rebecca Ryan, campaign director of Defund the BBC. Rebecca, you're very welcome to the programme. I mean, Samir Shah, as we've seen there, is a pretty softly spoken chap, but there's a lot of power behind his words. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the thing is, Gary Lineker's the gift that keeps on giving for us at Defund the BBC, you know, because every time he does...
He's your greatest asset, is he?
Pardon?
He's your greatest asset, is he?
He is, indeed, because every time he makes a mistake like this, people come to us and sort of say, how can I stop paying for this organisation? You know, I don't want to be forced to pay for such a biased organisation as the BBC.
Is he a Defund the BBC sleeper agent, Rebecca? Tell us the truth. Is he topping up his £1.2 million salary with money from your coffers?
Without realising it, I think, but potentially he is. But the thing is, the BBC, as long as it carries on with Gary Lineker in this way, allowing him to tweet what he likes, it's in breach of its contract with the British people. You know, its obligation under the Royal Charter is to be impartial, and it's not delivering on that. And that's what gives it the right to essentially tax people. I mean, the licence fee is a tax on live broadcast TV, and they're in breach of that. And therefore, you know, they have to get a handle on it. And yeah, it is heartening to see that this potential new chairman coming in is aware of it, and we would hope that he's going to do something about it. But, you know, this has been going on for quite some time now, a number of years, where Gary Lineker has just been...
Yeah, well, there were, of course, Rebecca, Rebecca, you'll be far more aware than I will, that in September, there were updated social media guidelines which stressed the importance of high standards of civility in public discourse. Includes treating others with respect, even in the face of abuse, and not using offensive or aggressive language. I actually spoke to Jonathan Gullis yesterday. He's one of the Conservative MPs. I was in Parliament. We happened to bump into one another, and he was telling me about this because Gary Lineker criticised the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. He criticised the Deputy Party Chairman of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, and Jonathan Gullis, who I talked to there. And it's interesting, from Jonathan Gullis's perspective, Gary Lineker was accusing him of not having read the guidelines, or as he put it, or having them read to you, basically implying that Mr. Gullis can't read and he's stupid, and a Conservative MP who can't read. I mean, that to me is something which is not nice public discourse. Do you think anything's going to happen to Gary Lineker this side of Samir Shah becoming the fully fledged chairman of the BBC with all the power and influence that actually gives him?
I mean, it doesn't look likely, does it? As you've said there, you know, to talk about MPs in that way, he is completely lowering the tone of national discourse. It's unnecessary to be sending these memes and to be swiping at MPs, and it's always MPs from one party, not the other, isn't it? So it seems highly unlikely, after his sort of fit that he had earlier in the year, when, you know, he got all his friends to sort of walk out as well, that the BBC are going to do anything to stop Gary Lineker doing what he's been doing. It's just he's basically sort of flagrantly sort of flouting what's been said to him, and he's just like, it's business as usual for him.
Just on Jonathan Gullis, the exact quote, I have it in front of me here, says that Gary Lineker alleged that Mr. Gullis, the Conservative MP, hasn't read the new guidelines, or should I say, had someone read them to him. Is Gary Lineker too big to fail? I mean, why is the BBC holding on to him to such a degree when he's such a controversial character? There are so many people, I'm absolutely not one of them, but there are many, many people who know an awful lot about football and could present Match of the Day. Why do you think it is that they have he's become a political figure now, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? And I think the BBC are almost in awe of their sort of what they call their talent, of these big players, these big voices, and they seem to sort of just let them get away with this behaviour. You only have to look at the likes of the Jimmy Savile and those kinds of situations where you've got these huge personalities.
We shouldn't compare Gary Lineker to Jimmy Savile. I mean, that's not a fair comparison, is it?
I mean, I'm not talking about what Jimmy Savile did compared to Gary Lineker. What I'm saying is they're having these huge personalities in the BBC that the BBC can't deal with, and that's the concern, isn't it? And that's why people sort of say we don't want to be paying for the BBC. You know, it's absolutely fine if the BBC wants to employ who it wants to employ and deal with it how they want to, if people are voluntarily funding the BBC. So that's what it comes down to, is every time Gary makes a mistake like this, we get flooded with people saying, how do we stop paying for the BBC? And we just tell them, as long as you're not watching any live broadcast TV or BBC iPlayer, then you don't have to.
So you can't watch even just to be clear to people who don't want to pay their licence fee, you can't watch any BBC programme live, and you can't watch the iPlayer at all, even if it's not live programming, if you don't have a TV licence.
That's right. And you also can't watch any other channel as it's live broadcast. So you can't watch Sky News on YouTube. So it's, you know, it's basically live broadcast TV that's the issue for most people.
But you can watch catch up on all those stations.
Pardon?
You can watch catch up on all those stations. For example, you could
Exactly.
go on the
Catch
Talk
up
TV
on
player
all
and watch catch up. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Rebecca, thank you very, very much indeed. Rebecca and Ryan, their campaign director for Defund the BBC.